The heart of it is that Michael Cohen told us that he was approached by Stormy Daniels' lawyer, and Stormy Daniels had negative information that she wanted to put in a lawsuit against Trump. So Michael Cohen decided on his own, that's what he told us, on his own, to see if he could take care of this.
So that was March of 2023. Okay, that's 15, 16 months ago. That's Bob Costello talking to reporters after he had testified in front of a grand jury. That's something. That's from the vault, isn't it?
Right.
Jonathan Turley, constitutional law attorney, professor, George Washington University, and a Fox News contributor. And you were in the courtroom yesterday. I assume you're going back in this afternoon. Morning, sir. I think what Andy was talking about a moment ago is pretty relevant here. He says, for the defense, the problem is the judge. And for the defense, they're treating this NDA like it's kryptonite. In other words, you say, hey, we had an NDA. What's wrong with that? What's illegal about that? Okay, now, where are we today? Your witness.
Right. I think Andy was spot on, as he always is. There is a slight conflict in the narrative being presented by the defense, but I think the more important point is the impact of the judge. I think that is one of the reasons they called Costello. Calling a witness like Costello is always a risk, and the question is, do you take that risk? In a normal case, I wouldn't have called additional witnesses, because this case is collapsing on its own weight. And I just can't imagine any conviction could be upheld on appeal. But this is not the ordinary case. And so what we're really looking at with Costello is an effort for the defense to take down this case here and now. And Costello is a very effective witness. He's not someone that's going to get spooked on the stand. I do think that today he needs to sort of dial it down a little bit in any conflicts with the judge, because his testimony is hitting below the waterline for the prosecution. These are not just contradictions. These are basically direct statements that Cohen committed perjury before this jury.
Listen to President Trump earlier today as he was walking into court. He made comments, as he usually does, and it was about the judge and how he perceives this court today.
Kangaroo court. There's never been anything like this that I've ever seen. Now, I had 2 other trials that were kangaroo courts also. It's stacked up. And hopefully appellate division will take care of those things because they're, egregious. And the problem is that New York is really on trial itself. The whole world is watching. They're seeing what's happening.
I asked Brett Tolman this question. I would ask you as well, because you are an experienced person in the courtroom. When something like Cohen's testimony happens and Costello's testimony happens, is the jury also thinking along those lines? I mean, perhaps they don't think it's a kangaroo court, but can they see what Trey Gowdy saw, which was bias in favor of the prosecution by the judge?
I think that some of them may see that, but let's not delude ourselves. We had a host of another network yesterday actually coming out and saying that Cohen was fantastic on the stand, that even though Cohen said that he stole the money, it was really just self-help and his getting his bonus back.
I just want to interrupt you for a moment and play that very sound, because it was stunning to me as well. This is Lawrence O'Donnell, MSNBC, saying stealing from the Trump organization's no big deal because he deserved it. Watch.
Later, when Cohen was asked about that on redirect by the prosecution, it didn't really sound like stealing $30,000. It sounded a lot like Michael Cohen doing the little that he could within that calculation to rebalance the bonus he thought he deserved, and it still came out as less than the bonus he thought he deserved and the bonus he'd gotten the year before.
I mean, golf clap for the spin there, Jonathan.
Well, that left many of us really dumbfounded. I wrote about it this morning on the blog because I think that we need to see the serious aspect of what O'Donnell said, which is there's the level of delusion and denial that you heard in his words is not going to be unique. There are members of this jury that actually cited MSNBC as their main news source, and they likely are bringing that same baggage in. So what people see in that courtroom can be heavily distorted by what they brought to the courtroom before. Most everyone else, including people on other networks, have said, look, this has been a disaster, and we ultimately have to deal with the fact that this guy just admitted to grand larceny.
Yep. So he is on the stand right now, Costello is. And just reading through the emails, folks like Andy McCarthy are saying, the prosecutor for the state says, is that an email you provided to our office? Costello says, I provided a lot of emails to your office. Andy remarks it's only the first question, but Costello's loaded for bear to remind prosecutors that he gave them hundreds of relevant documents and emails, but prosecutors refused to share them with the grand jury. So you've got that out there right now.
Yes.
Costello could be the last witness, right? Brad Smith, the judge said, you're not going to be on the stand. I guess in a way, this could wrap up
yes,
today,
there's an
Jonathan.
interesting... Yeah, there's an interesting tension as you see the cross-examination of Costello, because Costello leveled a very troubling allegation against Bragg's office. He said that he gave Bragg's staff a huge number of emails that directly contradicted what Cohen has been saying. And when he took the stand, it was clear that the prosecutors had not shown that to the jury. And indeed, they tried to prevent Costello from sharing that information. That's a very serious allegation. It suggests that that the prosecutors actively framed the evidence so that the grand jury didn't see the contradiction. So I think you're going to see some tension when the cross-examination begins. Smith himself raised a very interesting issue today, and this is one of the leading experts on election law. And the judge effectively prevented him from testifying by narrowing his testimony to the point that he really couldn't get to the merits. But what he said today was that under the federal election law, the Trump people wouldn't have even declared this as an election contribution until after the election had run.
Right.
And that's something that dovetails with many of us have noted. It's hard to see how this was an effort to rig an election that had already been completed when the payment ultimately was made to Cohen. But what Smith is saying is even the payment to Stormy Daniels wouldn't have to have been made till after the election. So how can that be part of an effort to influence the election?
Honestly, that is a great point, the root of the matter. I wanted to also ask you this. If this is the last witness and they're about to wrap up today, Jonathan, why not just do closing arguments on Thursday when court's back in session and make the jury power through rather than giving like another 6 days to think about it before they hear closing arguments?
Yeah, that's a very good question. As defense counsel, I can tell you long delays with jurors are usually not welcome, particularly if things are going well. But remember, this jury's not been sequestered. So they're going home. Mm-hmm. Where there's TVs, there's radios, there's neighbors. You don't know how that's going to affect them. So usually with defense counsel, if you're on a roll, you want to call the final hand. And that's not likely to happen. Now, the judge has two major things to deal with, among a myriad of other issues. One is this directed verdict motion. In my view, he most certainly should grant that motion. But he's already indicated that he won't. And in some respects, I think that his statements about the directed motion are disturbing because he keeps on referring to, as I wrote about a week ago, that this is really a question of credibility of Cohen. And he can't simply declare Cohen is lacking credibility. That's a fact decision. He's forgetting the fact, or he's omitting it, that none of the elements of the crime have been established, not even alleged by these witnesses. They stand contradicted at best. So he could grant that directed verdict on that grounds. But then he's got to deal with what we call the charging issues. And that's going to be how he instructs the jury. This is going to be enormously important. The defense is going to want to be heard at length. I believe that there are layers of reversible error in this case. And what is often the case is you see judges committing errors like this, and then they try to sort of do a Charlie Brown with the football motion, and at the last minute put in an instruction to clean it up. I don't think they can clean it up here. So what Mershon is suggesting is I'll instruct the jury on all of the references to campaign violations. I think that's coming really too late. This jury has been told over and over again, from opening argument to Pecker, to Michael Cohen, to the prosecutors, the judge has allowed them to say there were election violations. I'm quite convinced that that jury believes that there were election violations, even though none have occurred in this case with regard to Trump.
Wow. Just to quote you, the trial is riddled reversible error. The judge has shown serious bias in his rulings. His rulings are often difficult to square with the rules of evidence. Costello is losing patience with the judge, as many of us were. That's not a glowing review from Turley, is it, Dana?
It is not. Jonathan Turley,
not even
thank
close.
you so
Thank you, sir.
much.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.